at the end of this.
Partners.
Yeah.
Me and him.
So I want to start first by thanking all of you guys. You guys chased us around the country, took a lot of late-night flights, missed a lot of flights, all because you're trying to tell the story of a really exciting Tigers baseball season this year. And we really appreciate it. Like, I know it's hard at times, but you delivered a lot of really good content for our fans, and they really responded to it. And so I want to start by thanking you for all the effort that goes into covering us. As it often does, the end of a season brings many moments of reflection. I have felt many moments of reflection over the past 48 hours. And I figured it may help to start by sharing some thoughts that have been circling in my head over the past couple of days. First, I've been thinking a lot about the fans over the past couple of days because I was really impressed by how quickly they responded to and embraced this team. We built this team very differently than the Tigers playoff teams of the past. We played the game very differently than those teams did in the past. But we could feel every day when we showed up to the ballpark that they were locked in on everything. They really responded to the non-traditional pitching approaches. They responded to the different lineup constructions. They responded to the different in-game moves. We really felt that throughout the season. And it's one of the many reasons why I was so excited we beat the Astros. We earned playoff games in this ballpark this year. It's been a long time since there's been playoff baseball in this park. And seeing Comerica Park come alive and become a competitive advantage in October again was one of the most rewarding parts of this entire season. I hope it was rewarding for our fans, and I think I can speak for every player and coach and staff member when I say that those moments, you know, when we clinched against the White Sox in games 3 and 4 in the ALDS will forever be etched in our memory, and they serve as the ultimate motivator for us moving forward. That's why you take these jobs. That's why you become manager of the Tigers. That's why you become a player for the Tigers, and you push through that last rep in the middle of November to try to prepare yourself to ultimately play for an extra month. So that has to be the ultimate motivator for us to create more scenes like that, because it was really special, and it's something that we have been talking about nonstop since those moments happened. The second thought I had was I'm still struggling to reconcile the gut punch that we felt on Saturday with what was a wildly successful season for this whole organization. There were moments in games 4 and 5 of the ALDS where breaks could have gone our way, and they didn't. If those breaks had gone our way, we're probably sitting in New York right now preparing for the ALCS, but they didn't go our way. And those moments, are going to be really tough for us to process and swallow this winter, because they should be. However, getting your heart ripped out on one of the biggest stages in our game is both a blessing and a curse. It's a curse for all the obvious reasons, but it's a blessing because it means you're playing for something. It means the last game of the season really matters. It means this is a winning group that had a credible chance to be the last team standing at the end of the year. That's a change for this organization. It's something that all of our players, our coaches, and our staff members should be really proud of. I know I'm really proud of it. So I still find myself struggling to reconcile those two things. And then the last thought I had was, in my chair, when you get to the end of the season, you can't help but step back and try to assess the state of the organization. I found myself doing that a lot over the last 48 hours. I'm a firm believer that we should be judged by the goals that we articulate for ourselves, and I found myself revisiting a lot of the goals that I outlined in my opening press conference 2 years ago. I can confidently say at this point, we are headed in the right direction. We are on the right path in this organization. Everything I outlined in that press conference is happening in this organization. The first goal that I outlined on that day was I wanted to acquire, develop, and retain young talent. We've placed a huge emphasis on that over the last 2 years, and it helped us win the first postseason series in 11 years with the youngest team in baseball. It helped us produce 7 top 100 prospects, helped us produce the best winning percentage in the minor leagues of any organization, and it helped us produce one of the best farm systems in baseball. it also drove this guy to build a really talented coaching staff that's going to get the absolute most out of the young players that get here. We saw so many debuts this year, and we saw so many players get better, and it's all because of that emphasis on developing the young talent. The second thing we talked about was trying to create this culture of development, and that's happening at all levels of this organization. Like, look no further than Parker Meadows' first half compared to his second half. He got way better. There are young players transforming in this organization that are getting a lot better, and they're really helping us win. And it's also starting to filter into free agency. There are players like Michael Lorenzen, Jack Flaherty, Carson Kelly who are coming here because they know they're going to get better. They're starting to rebrand this organization as a place where they can get better. And now this team this year rebranded the organization as a place where you can go get better and win at the same time. That's a huge breakthrough for us. And then finally, the third thing I talked about on that day was dominating the strike zone on both sides of the ball. We haven't achieved that goal yet, but we made some huge strides. Like, on the pitching side, our emphasis on the strike zone has produced a top 5 pitching staff in all of baseball right now. Top 2 in many of the metrics that really matter. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we had a few too many strikeouts at the end of the year with the young lineup, but these guys are doing a lot better job in the strike zone. When you watch us play, when you watch our at-bats right now, we do a way better job of staying disciplined to the strike zone. We do a way better job of forcing pitchers into the zone, challenging our hitters, helping them produce major league quality at bats. That's something I'm really proud of. Now, what does this all mean? It means nothing unless we find a way to keep growing and getting better as an organization. I don't often talk like this because I don't want to create much complacency in this organization. It's not a moment for us to step back and boast about the progress we've made. But it is a moment to acknowledge the things that are working here, acknowledge the things that have changed the look and feel of this organization over the past 2 years. And it's an opportunity for us to double down on those things and find new ways to get better. Those are the things that I've been thinking about over the past couple of years, but I wanted to start by expressing a ton of gratitude to the fans, to AJ, to our coaches, to our staff, and to our players for producing not only a pretty magical ride that we all experienced this summer, but also a very bright future that we're all really proud of moving forward.
I'm not sure I can follow that. But I want to echo what Scott says, and that we're heading in the right direction. I also want to extend my thanks to everyone for going along the ride with us, and I know the season makes you feel like the ride has to end, but in reality, got to fill up our gas tanks and keep driving. This year was special on so many levels, and I told Scott, throughout this, I had a range of emotions this season, from the optimism at the beginning of the season to the grind through, the early parts of the month, getting off to a good start. And then we hit what we felt like was rock bottom, and boy, did we bounce out of that quickly and effectively. And so, my staff, the players, the coaches, the organization, we did our best to give this city a team to be proud of. And I don't ever want to say we exceeded expectations because our expectations are always going to be greater than anybody else, but we did our best. And as I told the players, we want this to be the floor. We want this feeling to resonate throughout the offseason so that we can, come back even more determined than ever to experience seasons like this, moving forward. So you guys did stick out with me, every day, twice a day, sometimes 3 times. But we do need to be proud of where we are and what we're doing, while continuing to push us to bigger and better things. And I'm very proud of the 2024 Tigers.
Yeah, I think for both of us, we saw some really exciting things with this team. You know, we demonstrated over the last 50 or so games we can play with anybody. You know, I think our track record suggests that we can. At the same time, the second thought I have in my head, and I know AJ has in his head too, is these guys can get way better. A bunch of these young players can get a lot better. They're just starting to get comfortable at this level. Think about like the example I just shared with Parker Meadows. Like he got punched in the mouth early in the season, and he responded, becoming one of the better players in baseball, and one of the main reasons why we played so well down the stretch. A bunch of these young players that showed up in August haven't even gotten to the second half yet. Trey Sweeney hasn't gotten to the second half. Jace Young hasn't gotten to the second half. Jackson Jobe hasn't gotten to the second half. So we got to stay focused on the things that got us here, on the approach that we took that helped us create that team. But I don't think there's anyone in this building that doesn't think that on an individual level and a team level that this team can't get a lot better.
You have, in this meeting, you have outlined, at least in general terms, your to-do list, for lack of a better way to say it. Can you kind of outline some areas that you will, roster-wise, look to improve or fortify?
Yeah, I think there are two main fronts that we need to work on this offseason. The first is, regardless of what we do this winter, the majority of our growth has to come from within. There are too many young players on this roster that can and must improve this offseason. The gains that they access this offseason with the help of his coaching staff, when we add all those up, when we get to Lakeland in February, they have to outweigh anything we do via an external addition, because there's just too much opportunity on our roster. It's the beauty of building with young players. It's why we've been so adamant about building with young players, because they continue to improve. We got to help them improve. We can't ignore the growth that needs to come from within. That's not to say there won't be external additions. There will be external additions. I don't know exactly what position they are going to come yet, because it's been 48 hours since we played, but I do have some thoughts on it. When I look at this team, I'm really proud of all the versatility we built into the team, because it gives us a ton of opportunity this offseason to add in different places. Like, take a look at Matt Vierling. Like, he can play on the dirt and on the grass. Like, if we find an addition on the grass that can help us, then he moves to the dirt. If we find an addition on the dirt that can help us, then he moves to the grass. Like, it's one of the reasons why we build the team this way. So I think positionally, we got a little left-handed towards the end of the year. I think we could use a right-handed bat to balance us out. And then pitching. We're always going to be trying to add pitching. I really like the depth that we have right now, both in the pen and in the rotation, but we got to add more pitching this offseason. I think I'll have more specific thoughts when we get to the GM meetings or the winter meetings, but I got to do a little more work on what exists in free agency and trade.
Can I just follow up real quick on that point? The success of the opener bulk, I assume that the goal would be to get a 5-man rotation going into a full season. But did you like the success? Was the success of that enough to say, okay, maybe we can do that twice through a 5-man rotation and utilize our bullpen that way?
Yeah, as a general point, I believe it's our jobs to find strategies that suit our personnel. So we should play differently every single year, because our team's going to be different every year. So I think that strategy suited the pitching staff that we had, especially in the second half. I do like how well the players embraced their role and performed, and how well he executed in the dugout. It seemed like he brought in the right pitcher every single time down the stretch. It's nice to have that tool in our tool belt, that we could do that if we get to a point where we have a pitching staff that demands us to pursue that strategy in the future. I think, the way we have worked since I got here is we talk all the time. Like, he thinks he gets 4 months off. He doesn't at all. I'm going to call him all the time. Because when we are contemplating adding something to the team, like, it's really important that we understand how that player is going to be used. So I think we're going to start to add to this team with a clear strategy in mind. I don't know that we're going to do it as regularly as we did down the stretch, because I think, we have some really interesting starting pitching prospects that are coming up, including Jackson, that have a real chance to, be a traditional starter for us. So I think that's TBD. I think we're going to talk a lot more about that in February in Lakeland. But it's nice to know that those non-traditional strategies can work here, and that our players understand the underlying logic behind those strategies and why they're effective.
I was also going to ask about the bullpen, the since that got answered, with the shortstop position moving forward, how much can you count on Javi going into next season? Do you have to have some contingency plans, and where does Sweeney fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, our collective opinion of the shortstop position has improved because we added Trey Sweeney. It's really hard to find those left-handed true shortstops, so we are really glad that he's here. As far as Javi, there's a role for him on this team. I just talked about needing a right-handed bat to balance out our infield that is increasingly left-handed right now. Like, Javi's right-handed, and he has performed as well as any shortstop in the game at periods in his career. One of the things that we talked about a lot this summer was he was struggling to rotate. He was feeling restricted. We think a lot of that has to do with his hips. So him undergoing the procedure and coming out of the procedure positively is a good sign for us. He's got to get a lot better this offseason to demonstrate that he can make our infield better, but there's no reason to suggest that he won't have a role on this team if he comes out of the surgery feeling like he can rotate it the way he used to when he was performing among the best players in the game, and he certainly fits the framework of our infield right now.
Do you have a clear idea yet whether he'll be physically ready for the start of next season?
We know he'll be participating in spring training. He may be ready by opening day. We're just not sure yet because we got to see how he gets through all the checkpoints of his rehab. But there's a reason why he got the surgery as early as he did, to try to give him the best chance possible to be ready for opening day. We'll have steady updates for you guys this offseason, but the general timeline will allow him to be a participant in spring training and have a fighting chance to be ready for opening day. We'll update that timeline as we get more information.
Scott, you said that in your press conference when you started that you have the full support of ownership. If the team ever got close, that's when the money would be spent. Well, you guys are pretty damn close. While nobody expects you to go get like a Juan Soto, there's going to be a lot of free agents out there. Are you going to have the funds to get whoever you want?
Yes, and listen, I totally understand the question. It's totally fair, and I understand that dollars spent is the most convenient measure of activity in a given offseason. It's not really how we think about it. Like, we don't chase payroll thresholds; we chase talent. If there's a talented player we have conviction on that fits how we play and fits our clubhouse, and he costs money, we're going to pursue him aggressively. If we find a talent we have conviction on that fits how we play and fits our clubhouse that costs prospects, we've done a lot of work to restock our farm system and should have the prospects to be able to make a trade like that. And if we find a situation where a player, who we have conviction on, who fits how we play, costs both money and prospects, well, we're prepared to do that too. We just have to anchor all our decisions by the talent and how much that player can help us first and foremost. It's what has guided us to this position that we are, and we're not going to lose sight of that.
There's a lot of players that are Rule 5 eligible that you could add to the 40-man roster. How tough is those decisions going to be coming up here in the next couple months?
Talk about a blessing and a curse. Like, you want to go into the deadline like with a lot of tough decisions because it means you have a lot of talented players, but it is really tough to decide who you need to protect and who you don't. The short answer to your question is I don't know yet, but we're gonna spend a lot of time on it. I hope you ask that question every single year because it means we have a talented system with players that can really help us and players that other teams really want. But those are undoubtedly going to be tough decisions for us as we get into the winter meetings.
Scott, in some ways, Spencer Torkelson is still young. In other ways, has more than 1,400 big league plate appearances. Do you guys view first base as an area that can be upgraded, and how does the evaluation of Torque factor into that?
I think Torque is one of several players that needs to have a big offseason this year. It's no secret that Torque had a turbulent year this year. There were times when I was watching him where it seemed like he was more focused on covering shapes than driving the baseball. And then there were other times throughout the summer where it seemed like he was more focused on driving the baseball, and that created some holes and created a little bit more of a pitchable hitter throughout times. The best version of Torque does both. He covers all the shapes and he drives the baseball. We need to get that version out of him. But it's an area that we need to improve overall production. We have confidence that Torque is every bit as talented and has a promising future as he always has. We just have to find a way to get that complete hitter out of him. It's one of the reasons why we're going to have exit interviews with all of our players, and we're going to challenge them on concrete goals this offseason. To the point I made earlier, we have to get more gains out of these young players, and we have to have a big offseason. It's not a moment for us to just pack up and then see each other in Lakeland in February. We have to find ways for his really talented coaching staff to surround these players and support them as they make adjustments that are ultimately going to create better versions when they arrive in Lakeland than when they departed Detroit. And Torque is one of those guys.
Kenta Maeda, rough year, obviously. 1 year left. Where does he fit in, and does he fit in? And is that another one that's going to have a pretty challenging exit interview going into the offseason?
Yeah, I think this is just a commentary on myself. I think we could have done a better job of preparing him for the season last year. It was a difficult transition for him to go from a familiar organization to an unfamiliar organization. I think we saw when he showed up in Lakeland that his stuff wasn't quite as crisp as it has been in his career. It took him some time to really build the arm strength and the finish on his pitches that ultimately made him successful for most of his career. I think we started to see that stuff in the second half, especially when we moved him to the bullpen. He's still really talented. I think he can be a little bit better of a strike thrower. I think his execution can improve, but it starts with the stuff. So we're going to talk to him about making some changes to his offseason and better supporting him so that the version of him that shows up in Lakeland is ready to be more similar to the version that has made him a very successful starter in this league before. It's going to be one of the conversations that we talk about this month in the exit interviews. But yeah, there's absolutely a place for him on this team, and he has demonstrated that he can help very successful big league teams.
Scott, you mentioned the difference, or one of you mentioned the difference between maybe just selling development, but now you can sell winning, incredible contender you talk about. How different do you think that will make some of the conversations with free agents this winter, in terms of, maybe some doors are open that maybe weren't before?
Yeah, I mean, AJ should opine on this too, but one thing I don't think we should forget is one of the reasons why we played so well down the stretch is we were really young, we were really athletic, we could really pitch, and we were really tough to face as an opposing manager and team. We had some matchup issues up and down our roster that proved really difficult for other teams. We got a lot of feedback from different players around the organization about the brand of baseball we were playing, how aggressive we were, how fun we were to watch, how we run the bases, how hard we play in the outfield. I have found in my career that when you see those teams out there, you want to join them as a player. We had that in Chicago. We had that in San Francisco as well. So I think it's going to change the conversation with players. I hope we are an attractive destination, both because we've demonstrated we can help players get better here, but also we've demonstrated what it feels like to be on a winning Tigers team here for the first time in a decade. And anyone who is watching us play down the stretch should want to be here. And so I expect it to change the tone of the conversations that I have with players, and I know it'll definitely change the tone that AJ does, because I know a lot of players around the league want to play for AJ.
I mean, let me follow up on that. One thing that players appreciate is the open and honest of where you're at and what you can offer, right? So, and I'm talking about internal, external. And as much as I wanted to make sure our players know, that we're a winning organization, we are dedicated to being, player driven, that we are going to drive them as far as they can possibly go. I'm also speaking to the rest of the league. We feel good about where we're at, and we know that things have changed, and that our responsibility now is going to be prepared for what's ahead. And we want to be known as a winning organization. Well, we are. We want to be known as a playoff team. Well, we are. And now the work really begins. When I say that this 2024 team is the floor, it doesn't guarantee anything. Like, we need our internal guys to take that seriously and use it as fuel moving forward. And we also need anybody that we trade for, that we acquire, that we sign, understands the expectation of being a Detroit Tiger. And so I think the exciting part for us is now all of these things that we've talked about since the day that he arrived, all these things that we've talked about since the day that I have arrived, we're chipping away at earning that, that credibility and that respect that gives you the opportunity to take it to the next step. I don't want this to be really talked about, after today. Like, we got to get forward and look forward. I don't love talking about the future. This is actually the time for us to start moving forward because, one of my coaches always says, the moment's over, and then now what are you going to do about it? And I think it's important for us to take that mindset into the offseason, whether you're talking to, a prospect who's going to come to big league camp for the first time, a returning player who now has played in the playoffs, or someone who joins the organization this offseason. Like, the chance to win here is real, and we need to do our part.
I do have one quick addition. When I first took this job, I used to talk about our prospects a lot, and he used to roll his eyes like crazy. And now he's already talking about big league camp and which ones are going to be there and how excited he is.
That's just
to
a
use
subtle
them and all that
reference to
stuff.
some young players that have earned the right to come to big league camp. You guys can guess who those guys are. See you soon, Max, Kevin.
Oh, now you're making the decision.
Lorenzo. I got a lot of wish lists for big league camp.
Scott, you mentioned the coaching staff working with these players, which leads to the usual end of season question: will the coaches all be back?
AJ?
Yeah, I'll take that one. First off, I do want to recognize the work of our coaches, tireless work and incredible work. And I know it's behind the scenes a lot. And I love when the players talk about our coaches in such high regard because of the work that they put in with them. And it goes beyond hitting, pitching, fielding, base running. It's also our training staff. It's our strength staff. It's our nutrition staff. It's our clubhouse staff. I mean, we really have a really good group, and obviously those conversations are going to happen over the course of this week. And I'm really glad that we haven't had those conversations until now because it means that we played into October. But I'd love to have every one of them back. We do have a good thing going. This is as a cohesive of a group as I've had since I've been here in Detroit. We obviously got to get through some conversations with the group, and this is the time of year where other organizations try to poach your talent. But I would expect everybody back in full and build off of the processes that we created this year.
Scott, when a team grows together, young team grows together, talk about chemistry and camaraderie and everything else, there seems to be sometimes in sports a temptation to just keep it all together and ride it out and keep it going. Do you have to somewhat resist that temptation and make some tough decisions? Or, in other words, do you anticipate not a lot of turnover or not?
The simple answer to that question is I don't know yet. I think, you guys have been in the clubhouse a bunch. I hope you have noticed what we have going on in the clubhouse is a real strength of ours. These guys genuinely like each other. They genuinely pull for each other. They genuinely help get the most out of each other. That's a very fragile balance. You can run that back and still not have that next year, and you can, change it and suddenly improve it. So I need to be really focused on what we have. I need to be hyper connected to AJ, the coaches, and the players so that I understand the dynamics down there. If we can both improve the talent level and improve the clubhouse culture that we have, we're going to be really good for a long time. That's a really difficult thing to do, but we can't make any additions without first asking ourselves, how is this going to affect the clubhouse chemistry that has gotten us to where we are? It's going to be something that I ask AJ and the staff over and over again when we contemplate additions this offseason, because as you noted in your question, it's one of the most important things that is driving the success that we've had.
Scott, obviously, when it comes to extensions, it takes two sides, two to tango there. But Tarek Skubal, how, from the Tigers' perspective, how interested would you be in pursuing extension discussions with him this offseason?
Yeah, totally fair question. I'm not going to comment on individuals. You guys saw what we did with Cole Keith. We started discussions privately. We came to an agreement, and we announced it, and we're really excited about it to this day, and we think Colt's a big part of our future. When I step back and I look at this team, we got a lot of young players that we are really high on. We're really bullish about their futures. They're already going to be together for a long time by nature of their service time. If we can extend the window for a lot of them, we're gonna try to do that. Again, you have to see eye to eye on all that stuff. My hope is that we are just announcing these things the way we did with Colt. I don't think it's constructive for me to comment on any of the individuals, and I don't think it's fair to them given the sensitivity of those talks. But it's another one of those questions that you want to keep getting asked to you, because it means you have players that are really talented that want to be here and that are a big part of us winning. So the more we get those questions, the better, I think.
AJ, can you talk about the value of some of the things you accomplished this year? You always talk about the value of a young player learning a routine, coming to the major leagues. And before the playoffs, you said, I'm going to argue that playoff experience doesn't matter until these guys get playoff experience, and I'll say it matters a lot. Just the value of having experienced both of those things and how they responded to that and got better.
No, I'm glad you asked that question, and I do believe that we took steps forward in all of those areas. I mean, obviously, we were doing a lot of firsts, and I talked from the back of the season or the end of the season. These were a lot of firsts. We walked into a clinching game on a Friday night at Comerica, packed house, White Sox in town, and in an electric environment, clinched for the first time for a lot of these guys. We then walked into Houston for the first time in a playoff series. No one expecting us to be there against a team that's been, the best team in the league for a decade, and swept them in 2 games and got to celebrate there for the first time. We go into the division series, familiar foe, but new experiences, get to an elimination game, come up just short for the first time. So all of those things are going to be used positively for our group. I mean, however the nerves were, wherever the anxiousness was, even though I tried to shield it from everybody by letting them know it didn't matter, obviously we're going to capture some of that gain of having been there, done that now. Now, going back into the season, of all the young players that Scott's referenced and that I've talked about, the one word that always comes to mind is adjustments. So, yes, the routines were very important when guys get up here. We try to build that in the minor leagues. Gark does a great job in the minor leagues governing the demands of so many different players and coaches to build these routines to where when they come up here, they can resort to that in the cage or the bullpen or behind the scenes. But then they go out and play in the competition, and our players had to make adjustments along the way. Think back to, we all look at the recency of what happened in the playoffs, but think back to when Parker Meadows was at his lowest in April, and the adjustments that he had to go make in Toledo to come back and then make those adjustments and apply in the big leagues. We wouldn't have gotten as far as we did without those adjustments, without Parker, making a real change. You go back to Colt Keith and the things that he was going through at the beginning of the season with putting the weight of the world on him, only to become one of the more productive second basemen for a long stretch of the season. Those were real adjustments that he was making at the highest level. You go back to, whether it's Jason Foley, in and out of the back-end reliever role. I'll say closer. That's for you, Chris. Those adjustments were very real. You go to Cater Montero, who came, kind of burst onto the scene and then ends up throwing a CG shutout. There are so many adjustments that have to make whether you have young players, veteran players, that make this season possible. And if it wasn't for those, we wouldn't have gotten where we are. So the value of the postseason experience, I get it. It's going to be great. We're watching 4 teams play for the World Series. 2 are going to play for the actual, World Series championship. And 1 team's going to ultimately win it. Hopefully those experiences in the postseason will help that, but what will help us have another winning season is if this organization buys into all the adjustments that we're going to ask out of all of us to be a better team. And that starts from the ground up the day you get drafted all the way through playing in a playoff game.
Scott, I think this one is more for you, but you can both comment if you want. But Casey Mize, one pitcher we haven't talked about yet, you leave him off the ALDS roster. Obviously, he's battled injury and trying to come back and make some adjustments, as you were just talking about, AJ. But where do you see the ceiling for Casey right now, and how do you get him back to being the pitcher that we've all seen that he can be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some positives from this year for Casey. I think he's pitching with a different fastball than he's ever had before. That fastball can be explosive at the top rail. He can miss bats at the top rail with it. I think some of the adjustments we are looking for and that he is actively working on are with his secondary pitches, like to find the slider that he can command to both sides of the plate, to find the split that can go strike to ball, that can really put a hitter away when he gets to 2 strikes. He still has, all the God-given ability in the world. He is one of the more determined workers we have in our clubhouse. We just got to find a way, now that he's healthy and now that he is, removed from the TJ, my hope is that he has a big offseason and that he shows up to Lakeland with as high a ceiling as anyone has in this organization, because he has that ability and he has that work ethic, and those are pretty compelling combinations. I think just refining a little bit of both the shapes and the way he's executing the shapes can unlock that potential and translate it into performance.
There's been a lot of talk about Parker today and the improvements that he showed throughout the summer. Just how do you feel he can continue to grow and build on his really hot end of the summer, and how does that help the prospects of the future of the outfield just moving forward?
It's a funny choice of words because I think he does grow every time I see him. Like, he's just like a little bit taller, a little bit longer. I think, with Parker, we always comment on his defense and how fun it is to watch him glide across the outfield from gap to gap. It is amazing the effect that he has on our pitching staff. Like, every time he catches a ball in the gap that most center fielders can't catch, like, that's leverage, right? If he doesn't catch that, then there's someone standing on second or third or scoring. It is a huge run value swing every time he goes into a gap or, climbs a wall and robs a homer. Like, those are huge building blocks for us. I've talked about outfield defense since the moment I got here. Like, having him in the middle of the field is so comforting to both of us because of the effect that he has defensively. Defensively, I'll defer to AJ. I don't know how he can get better. He's already so good. Like, I think at the plate, the adjustments that he's made, especially against velocity in the second half, have really opened up his approach at the plate. I think there are things that he can do, especially left on left, to help him stay in games and be more of a threat, and help him get on base, because we know the type of threat that he can be on base. I think he's just going to get bigger, he's going to get stronger, and he's going to get more experience with the day-to-day approaches that will make him successful in this year. I mean, he has barely completed a full season at this point, so a lot of the times that he's stepping in the box, he doesn't know the pitchers at all. He's not familiar with them. We do the best job we can to prepare these guys for what they're facing, but until you actually stand in the box and you actually see the shapes and how quickly the fastball gets on you and how much different shapes tunnel, you don't really know. So I think naturally he's going to become better as he gets more experience, and he's also going to get bigger, stronger, and just become more of a threat on both sides of the ball. So obviously we're really excited about him. We talk about him all the time, and he's just a huge part of what we're doing here.
Let me comment real quick on him, because I'll tell you how he can get better. He can call off Wenzel Perez in right center field when we.
I thought it. I wasn't going to say it.
He can do that. He's a tremendous player, but I want to tell a quick story about him. In Boyd's first game, game 2, he gets up with a really big at bat against Matt Boyd, and he's spinning him some sliders, and he's pulling off, trying to play hero. Fast forward to game 5, and what's the first thing he does? You go back and watch his at bat. He goes backside, down the line for a double. Like, that adjustment is that audible, or that ability to calm your swing down and take it. And nobody likes to say B hack, or like a secondary. What's your approach and what you're trying to accomplish? Like, those are things that experience is going to help. Those are. When he can become, a a guy who can defend a lot of different things with the bat, and we saw flashes of it a ton. You look at the overarching numbers, it doesn't tell the whole story for him, and that's why you have to dig a little bit deeper to see the type of season that he had or the type of impact that he had. But those subtle things, whether it's just a tick more command in the outfield, or whether it's a little bit of an approach whenever you're uncomfortable against a guy throwing a low slot sweeper and taking a backside single or a backside double, those are all little steps towards big results. And what I saw from him this year, the ability to cover all shapes, all velocities, all spin, right-handed, left-handed, and find a way to contribute gives me so much confidence to leave him in the game so that we can take advantage of what we obviously see, which is elite defense. So he's just scratching the surface. So when Scott talks about players that impressed you that still have a long way to go and still have areas to improve, Parker Meadows is one of them. He was arguably the best player that we had, on that given day in Game 5. But trust me, my staff and I will not let him be the same player moving forward because there's tons of areas for him to attack.
Scott, your team obviously energized baseball fans in Detroit, and the next step is it gets them wanting more. So just to circle back to your favorite topic for a second, the payroll thing, and I know you said you're chasing talent, not payroll threshold, but will you have parameters in place with Chris Ilitch going forward? Do you have to, every time one pops up, ask him about it? There must be some vague sense of how much you can add, is there?
That's not exactly how it works.
Fill me in, please.
Sure. I need to make compelling cases for additions that can help this team improve. When I do that, I know I'm going to have the support of Chris. I should also note, Chris and this entire organization's commitment is not just to payroll. It's to building a winning organization. We've invested tens of millions of dollars in the non-sexy items that are all key ingredients to winning organizations. We've spent tens of millions of dollars on the new clubhouse, on a new plane, on new features in Lakeland that you guys are going to see when you show up in February, on a new Dominican complex, on an expanded coaching staff, and a very expensive manager. And technology. These are all what winning organizations do. We're going to keep investing in the payroll, and we're going to keep investing in non-payroll items that make this place a destination and keep us in October for many years. It's on me to make those compelling cases, and I know when I do, I'm going to have full support to do the things that we believe can make us a winning organization for a long time.
I'm not touching that. But nice job.